thank you very much, and welcome everybody. We have come a long way from the year 2000, when only 1% of total VC investment in the US was in clean tech. 2011 is shaping to be a record year, with investments in clean tech deals up 26% compared to 2010. However, regulatory pressures, relentless political and policy attacks, budget reductions, and competition from abroad forces us to look for new ways to support the industry. We are privileged today to have two key players in this space who not only grew up in the same city, but who bring complementary perspectives on the road ahead. Nancy Floyd is a pioneer in the field and is the founder and managing director of Nth Power, a VC which currently manages over $420 million and has invested historically in over 45 companies. And Davlin, to my left, is Senior Advisor and Director of Development for the Carbon War Room, an NGO founded by Sir Richard Branson, looking to nurture climate change solutions from the business perspective at the gigaton level. Our panelists will give a short presentation each, and we will then move to an informal conversation, after which we will open the floor to Q&A. We will begin with Ms. Ann Davlin. She started her career as an environmental researcher and conference organizer for Senator Al Gore. Her career has focused on work in the environmental and energy fields, operating in both the private and public sectors. Mrs. Davlin's experience includes capital raising, brownfields development, and government and environmental policy. Mrs. Davlin serves as a senior advisor and director of development for the Carbon War Room, an NGO founded by Sir Richard Branson that harnesses the power of entrepreneurs to use market-based solutions to address climate change. She has oversight for the fundraising operations, which encompasses raising capital from individuals, foundations, and corporations, and liaisons with the Founders Circle and Board of Advisors. She was the managing director of Bayberry Green Fund, a division of Bayberry Capital Group, and throughout ran the Davlin Development Group, a consulting firm that worked with individuals and institutions to source and develop brownfield real estate opportunities domestically and internationally. She was a director of government programs at AIG Environmental and was a tri-state brownfield coordinator for the Regional Plan Association and has extensive experience with state and federal regulators. Ms. Davlin served on the New York State Brownfields Pocantico Roundtable. She was a special assistant for environmental projects for then Senator Al Gore and served in both the White House and in the Department of Defense, creating and implementing environmental policy. Her board and advisory committee appointments include the NYS League of Conservation Voters and the Steering Committee for the Clean Economy Network. She holds an MPA in environmental policy from Columbia University, SIPA, and she has lectured at Yale School of Architecture and the NYU Wagner School. She will talk much more in depth about the Carbon War Room's perspective on clean tech, and also will share with us some of their great successes. Please help me in welcoming Mrs. Ann Davlin.
Good morning. Thank you all. It's really wonderful to be here, and I want to actually thank, it's Georgie's reason that I'm here. Several months ago, she suggested that this would be an interesting forum, so I'm very appreciative. Let me jump in on the Carbon War Room. What I wanted to talk about today is, I feel like people are sort of down, that with the economy and sort of the uncertainty that people are not really comfortable, and I'm very optimistic. It might be that I work for Richard Branson, who's an incredibly optimistic guy. But I think that really what we're talking about today is opportunity. And we in the Carbon War Room see these types of investments, see the clean tech sector and the energy efficiency sector as the greatest wealth creation opportunity of our lifetime. And what I'm hoping to do with y'all today is give you sort of an overview of why we feel that way and how we think are the best ways to move forward. It's my intention to actually be very short on the slides. I'm much more interested in the dialogue and the questions, candidly. All right, that's the slide I wasn't going to share, but now that you have, that's Richard, our founder, chairman of our board, is Jose Maria Figueres, the former president of Costa Rica, whose phrase that came out of Copenhagen is, "There's no planet B." And Jigar Shah, our CEO. So what I'm really wanting to talk about today is, as Georgie said, what we do in the Carbon War Room is we harness the power of entrepreneurs to unlock gigaton solutions to climate change. We believe that business has to lead. It's too complex an issue for government to address alone. And as I said to you a second ago, we see this as the economic opportunity of our generation. How do we do it? This is how. We think the opportunity is policy, and here's a place actually that you're going to see that Nancy and I disagree a little bit. We see policy as a lockbox. There may be changes, there may not, but right now in the United States, I feel, again, just Ann Davlin, we're not really going to see any legislation at the federal level. States are doing what they can, but candidly, they have some other issues that have to be addressed. And I barely made it in from because of Irene, so I can tell you that how the East Coast is incredibly devastated right now. We believe in capital flows. So in a second, I'm actually going to talk to you about that. But we say policy is a lockbox. How can let's take the existing technologies that are proven that capital providers can get comfortable with, because one of the issues right now is capital sitting on the sideline. How do we get capital off the sideline? This, to us, is the marketplace. What we want to do is we want to increase the capital flows and increase the information flows. And let me show you how we do that, how we believe you do that. If I could, what am I doing? There we go. We believe in the left side of the McKinsey cost curve. What does that mean? That means that we think that greater than 50% of today's carbon emissions can be profitably offset by technologies that currently exist. Where's that investment going to come from? Here, look at, this is the source of capital. This is something put together by Spring Ventures, who's Sunil Paul, who some of y'all may know. He did it in conjunction with the folks from Bloomberg. Well, it was New Energy Finance, but now it's Bloomberg New Energy Finance. And if you look at it, the opportunity really is not so much in the government. The government is a sliver. I mean, it's certainly not in philanthropy, in sort of the philanthropic giving. It's in moving private capital. So that's where we focus. That's where we focus in the Carbon War Room, our efforts. We do it through these operations, and I'm happy to share this with you all later. But what's significant about this slide is we work in sustainable shipping, which I'm about to talk to you about, energy efficient retrofits, and aviation. What we do, and this is sort of the overall, when we are able to fulfill this full chart, we will have removed 17 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere. Our goal is to do that from between 2010 and 2020, and we do it solely through government incentives. We're not talking about, excuse me, I totally said that backwards, full stop. We do that 100% through capital investments, not through government incentives. Capital investments, not government incentives. Just got myself in trouble. This isn't for attribution, I hope. I'd hate to be for that to be my cover. So, shipping. If shipping were a country, you can see it. It would be the 6th worst emitter of carbon. The market barrier is that, and here, here we go. We can get easily to 30% efficiencies in less than a 3-year payback, which for those of y'all who are on the investment side, one of the holdups that you hear about when investing in the clean tech sector is the payback takes too long. We have documented examples that the payback can come faster. We believe, and the documents here the documentation here comes from IBA, IMO, the International Maritime Organization, is that we've overspent $57 billion a year, and we've done that in fuel costs essentially. So the reason that the market barrier with shipping is that the shipping companies pass on the cost of the fuel to the tenant. So Rio Tinto, Tesco, Walmart pay for the fuel. So the shipping owner is not motivated to upgrade their ships because there's no savings to them. Well, the market barrier was Rio Tinto, Tesco, and Walmart didn't know that. So we told them. And And they were amazed. Walmart alone overpaid, just in 1 year, in 2010, overpaid in fuel costs $26 million. So it adds up. There are dozens of technologies that exist today. This is our favorite. Remember in the old days, people used to sail. That's how you came across the ocean. So there's actually none of us were there, but we can imagine. I'm just saying. So there are technologies out there. You can actually use sails for 30% of a trip from Hong Kong to Long Beach, and you can move at the same rate as through traditional, through using bunker fuel. I just love that slide. So the technologies exist today. Now the way that, so that means they're tested. That means you can go to private equity, you can go to banks. I know there's some bank folks in the room because I've met them, and you can show the opportunity. I said that we told the companies. What we did is we created this website. I hope I can share it with you, called shippingefficiency.org. And shippingefficiency.org lists 60% of the active fleet. What that means is there are 60,000 ships on it, and you literally put in the number of the ship, and it tells you, and it gives you the data from 3 different sources, and it says, this is the engine, this is the last time it was upgraded, this is the efficiency as we understand it of the ship, this is this is its age. We ask the same questions of 3 sources. One is the shipping owner, one is the IMO, and the third is an independent organization called RightShip. RightShip is a fascinating group, and I think you'll see this across the clean tech sector, and actually across any sector, that they were put together by Rio Tinto and other mining companies because the ships kept sinking. They would send their products across the ocean and the ships didn't have the infrastructure. So RightShip started analyzing ships to find out how strong the hulls were and what was the distribution of weight. And what they found was they created an amazing database. What we've done is we've taken, again, what the shipping owners have said, what they've reported to the IMO, and what a third independent party has determined about the ships. You take that a step further, we've put together like energy saver. So A being the most energy efficient ships, F being the least. What we found is about 20% of the fleet was pretty energy efficient right now. What we also found is companies that were incredibly powerful in the area, like Rio Tinto, like Tesco, who is actually one of the largest shippers after Walmart, they were able to go back to Maersk and to the other companies and say, we're only interested in your A and B grade ships. They're not doing this because they're bleeding heart environmentalists. They're doing it because they're bleeding heart capitalists. Again, that's a quote I stole from the CEO of Maersk, so I just gave him credit. And so what Maersk then did is took that data and started saying, how can I actually make sure that I maintain my part of the sector? How can I be sure that I have enough A and B grade ships that I can continue to basically to dominate the market? And the first thing they realized is there are a lot of technologies that exist today that could address, and they've known about them since the 70s and 80s. There's just, for example, there's a paint that's non-porous that I know because when I worked in the Pentagon, the US Navy used it, that you would put on ships. It's 8 times more expensive than traditional paint, but it lasts 20 times longer, and you get the payback on it within 18 months. Again, a market barrier here is the way that businesses work. They say they don't look at the long-term savings. They look at how much is it going to cost me today on my budget. So what we've been able to, and that actually was a huge issue, candidly, for the U.S. military, to get the military to look not just in an annual funding cycle, but to look at the long-term savings, was a remarkable situation. That's exactly what we're doing here, is Maersk is starting to look at, well, when I dry dock my ships, I dry dock them for 3 months, I'm going to lose X million dollars. How can I actually make these basic retrofits? Maybe it costs a little more, and I can look at the payback. Additionally, here's an incredible opportunity for an investment group. Let's say you could get, this is a hypothetical of course, but these are the types of things that are happening in the marketplace. What if you could get Walmart to say, you know what, I'll give you a 10-year contract, Maersk, that I will use X amount of ships for X period of time, I'll move X amount of cargo. You could take that to the bank. Think of it as a shipping retrofit PPA. Could take that to the bank, and there's an incredible loan program for the bank. Hypothetically, we structured something like that, and it looks like you could get a 12% return on your money. You make that loan, you fund the technologies for the retrofits, you get the payback, in this case, over 18 months. There are incredibly innovative opportunities out there that are happening all of the time. And it's happening in the shipping industry, and I'm just going to briefly tell you something about energy efficient retrofits in a moment. But I think these times really call for more creativity, and in the case of shipping, that's certainly what we're trying to do. Let me just, the shipping label, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I got ahead of myself. This is essentially, so we're talking about the business side, but let's take a second also to talk about the community side. I know I say policy, ho-hum, I don't want you to think I'm just a cold person. So imagine green, imagine a greener port. Communities, if any of y'all are working in environmental justice, communities around ports are some of the worst for asthma and other diseases because ports run on, ships run on bunker fuel, which is one of the most toxic fuels. It's, ships don't have to currently use scrubbers right now, so lowering the use of bunker fuel actually can have a massive impact on the community. So we're taking it a step further. So we're talking about the ships retrofitting, but we're trying to get the ports involved as well. In fact, right here, the mayor here in Los Angeles, the mayor's been working very closely with the mayor in Vancouver to come up with a system where if you have a greener ship, if you have an A or B grade ship, they'll let you pull in. They'll let you pull in sooner. They'll give you a preferential berth. They'll let you go on to land power. So they're coming up with other ways to motivate, to offer cost savings that also has a positive effect on health. Imagine green ports, imagine green shippers, imagine green ship owners. So there are plenty of families that have been in the shipping a long time. One of the secondary markets that's coming around is you buy an E-grade ship, you buy it for $2 million, say, you upgrade it, make some basic upgrades, and then you sell it as a B-grade ship. You have a there's one or two instances now where they're showing a 20x profit. Again, being innovative, knowing the area that you're in, but taking it a step further. This was just sort of solving for capital, which is, Nancy's actually going to be going more into this whole area, and so I'm more interested, I'll visit with you on this in the Q&A period, I think. And so that's what I want to actually then just very basically, just briefly say about is energy efficiency. So in shipping, we saw a problem, the 6th worst emitter of carbon. The opportunity is to make basic retrofits to the ship, a greener paint, redistribution of weight. You can actually put a buffer around the smokestack. It can collect enough energy to actually run all of the on-ship, all the people, all the electrical use on ship. It's a basic solution. The market understands now that they've been overpaying for fuel. There's enough companies that actually have enough power that are actually pushing Maersk. It's creating a secondary market. Technologies that have been around for years are actually getting taken off the shelf and being put on ships, and the effect of that is capital is coming off the sidelines. It's a win-win for everyone. I just wrote an article called, I don't care if you call it climate change or PB&J. And I really honestly feel that way. I think a lot of people don't believe in climate change. I think we've had a lot of issues in the United States with that, candidly, in the past couple of years over the legislative piece. When you have, when you have congressional members from the West who Republicans who actually should be huge advocates of wind and can't be because of their caucus, or you have a Democrat in Michigan who got defeated. I mean, it's too much of a partisan issue right now. And so I want to actually lead with, where's the financial opportunity? Can you make money? Can you save money? If you want to keep it a secret that it's climate change that you're helping, that's fine with me. I'm a huge believer. I mean, you heard you heard what I did. I've always worked in this space. I very much believe in it. But if people don't, our sense in the Carbon War Room is take a step back. Don't talk to them about climate change. Talk to them about what's the opportunity for them. The last thing, as I said to you when we started, we work in sustainable shipping, we work in energy efficient retrofits, we work in aviation, we're on renewable fuels. We're working on a drop-in fuel that can be scaled up to a scalable renewable fuel for aviation. In energy efficient retrofits, it's the same issue as with shipping. The building owners have not been motivated to retrofit their buildings. The new HVAC systems, smart metering, because the savings is actually passed on to the tenant. It lowers their bill. So we've been working for 2 years on a financial mechanism that the loan is not paid back by the owner, but is paid back through other mechanisms. It's a PACE-like model for those of you who know about property assessed clean energy. PACE got defeated by Fannie Mae and by the mortgage lobby because the payback on the energy efficiency would be before the payback on the mortgage. What we've been able to do is worked with a private equity group who've identified $400 million. They're actually going to be doing they're actually going to be financing these retrofits in 5 cities in the US and Europe. Again, they're not doing this because they care so much about the environment. They're doing this because the return to them will be in the high teens. Just in closing, I just want to say, we do feel like in the Carbon War Room that this is the greatest wealth creation opportunity of our lifetimes. This is actually probably our best opportunity right now. And what we are committed to doing is building out across the sectors and working on, and working in this area. We do consider it climate change. We do want to remove 17 gigatons. We just want to do it in a way that keeps everybody engaged. So I thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. It's my pleasure to introduce Nancy Floyd. She's the managing director and founder of Nth Power. It's a venture capital firm focused on advanced energy technologies, energy efficiency, and sustainability. She's a true pioneer of the clean tech vertigo roller coaster. She launched in 1993 her fund that now manages over $420 million. She has served in 14 company boards, in addition to the boards of the American Council of Renewable Energy, the Center for Resources Solutions, Sustainable Asset Management in Zurich, and has been an advisor to the NREL. Prior to funding Nth Power, Mrs. Floyd launched 2 high-growth energy and telecommunications companies, NRC Energy Corporation in 1982, which was an early wind development company, and Pactel Spectrum Services in 1985. From 1977 to 1980, she worked on energy and telecommunications issues for the chairman of the Vermont Public Service Board. Mrs. Floyd was recently elected to the board of the Washington Gas Light Company and its parent company, WGL Holdings. She will share with us the perspective on the earlier spectrum of clean tech, which is the exciting field of venture capital, as well as her insights on the road ahead, given the political pressures, particularly in the US, and an area where she's deeply involved, changing the tide towards positive policy solutions for climate change and clean tech. Without further ado, I introduce to you Mrs. Nancy Floyd.
Well, first, all I can say is wow. I've never seen this many women in energy in one room. And, of course, yeah. I started my career working for the chairman of the Public Utilities Commission in Vermont. I was the first professional woman they'd ever hired. In 1982, when I started my wind development company, there were 2 women that were registered for the annual AWEA, American Wind Energy Association conference. I was one of them. But even fast forward, of the 14 boards that I've sat on for my firm, companies that we've funded, there's only been 1 other woman on those 14 boards. And of the over 8,000 business plans that we've seen, probably, this is a guess, maybe 24 have had women CEOs. So we have a ways to go, but wow, this is really wonderful to see. So I actually only have 7 slides because I really, like Ann, want to get to the Q&A. But first, I didn't put in the obligatory advertisement on who Nth Power is. And just very quickly, Georgie covered some of this, but I founded Nth Power in 1993 when nobody was investing in clean technology. We didn't even call it that then. It was new energy technologies. And what does a venture capital firm do, for those of you who don't know? It's not research and development. It's really the stage after R&D when companies are using venture capital to do product development, to hire sales and marketing people to bring a product to market. It is the most proven mechanism to bring new technologies to market. So that's what venture capital is. Mostly, we're investing in companies that probably have less than $1 million in revenues or 0 in revenues and are starting with just a couple of people. Our investors, by the way, are global, so we have money out of US, a lot of money out of Europe, Asia, New Zealand, Australia, and a little bit of money out of the Middle East. And that's interesting because that helps us keep on top of really the global trends. This is certainly a global business. This slide, it just, I think, makes the point that this is US numbers only, and this is venture capital in the US, that the financing environment in the US is robust. Now, this only goes from 2005 to 2010. So you can imagine what this number looked like in 1993. 0. In 2010, we had $5.6 billion that was invested by US venture capital firms in startup companies. I think Georgie said that was 23% of all venture capital. That's really an astounding number. And that went into 234 companies, new ideas. So just think of the pipeline that we're going to have of new solutions in 3, 5, 7 years. What's driving this investment? Well, certainly at the macro level, you understand some concerns about energy supply and demand as developing countries come online, climate change, whether you call it climate change or PB&J, energy security concerns. But what we're seeing is that there, for the first time, customers are empowered around energy. They want new solutions. They want to take matters into their own hands, and that's been a really big change over the last decade. And the other change, which has just occurred in the last couple of years, is that we're seeing the incumbent players, whether it's utilities, whether it's the companies like ABB and Schneider in Europe, whether it's Google, really getting engaged with these small startup companies, and we'll talk more about that and how important that is. By the way, for the first quarter of 2011, the numbers were up 53% from the first quarter of 2010. So who's actually getting this money? What technologies are investors interested in? And the red bar is, we say, generation. That is completely renewables, and I will say that that's been dominated by solar. So you can see that solar and distributed generation technologies have gotten the bulk of the dollars, but these numbers are a little bit misleading. because it's those technologies on what we call the supply side that require a lot more capital. So probably the better slide I should have presented is the number of deals that got done. Because while the energy efficiency bar, energy efficiency technologies, the blue on the bottom, doesn't look like it's garnering its share of capital, in fact, those deals require a lot less capital than, say, a new solar technology or a new wind technology or a new car. So energy efficiency has grown in interest to the venture capital community, even though it's not considered quote unquote sexy technology. And there's still strong interest in distributed generation and of course the holy grail, energy storage. Now, I have spent more time as a venture capitalist on public policy and on the Hill than I ever imagined, because policy is so important, and Ann and I are going to disagree on this, is so important in innovation. First, we need, as investors, we need predictable, stable markets. We need strong market signals, and we've had a lack of federal energy and climate policy, which is going to, I foresee, is going to continue for the next couple of years, and that truly threatens our ability to grow a green economy in this country. You know, the last major energy policy that we had passed, at least this is my opinion, is in 1978 under Jimmy Carter, President Carter, called PURPA. And without going into it, it really was started the deregulation of the utility industry in this country, and it led to the growth of independent power production, so large-scale wind and solar. So in the absence of federal energy and climate policy, it's the states that are filling a critical void, and there's some good news at the state level. In this country, we have the most developed ecosystem for innovation. You know, we lead the world in clean tech venture capital investment, and I say here the number is we get 73% of the total VC investment of the G20. You know, I say that the venture capital community is not yet significantly impacted by lack of federal policy, but I predict it will. And the first indicator is that we have fallen to third in overall clean tech investment in the world. And by that I mean not just venture capital, but projects, manufacturing, and you know, if you look at the statistics of the top 10 wind companies in the world, only one of them is headquartered in the US, and that's GE. Of the top 10 solar companies in the world, only 2 of them are headquartered in the US, and that's First Solar and SunPower. And SunPower, I think, just recently got into that top 10, maybe even the top 5. So the signs are there that without strong policy support, that we may very well lose our lead. As I said, the states are filling a critical policy void. California, and that's been true, by the way, for decades. California is leading the way, and I'm not saying that just because I live here. I'm actually an East Coast girl through and through. You know, of course, the state, as you know, just passed a 33% RPS. AB 32, which is California's climate legislation, which has been challenged or was challenged in the last election, you know, that has been really seminal legislation, and I'm going to give you some examples of how that has impacted innovation and job creation in the state. 40% as a result, I mean, California has, you know, 20 plus other favorable policies, and as a result, the state has seen 40% of all venture capital investment in clean tech. That is really no surprise, and 50% of our portfolio has been in California-based businesses, and we will invest all over the country, and we have deal flow from all over the country. California is motivating other states. That's good. 22 states have at least 11 favorable clean energy policies, and 100% have at least one. I want to give you just one quick anecdote on one of our companies that was impacted by policy in California, and specifically AB 32, the climate legislation. We have a company that is building out the retail infrastructure for clean fueling so that it can dispense ethanol, biodiesel, electricity charging, hydrogen, and oh, by the way, Zip cars will be there. They were started in Seattle, and as a result of legislation and policy in California, they moved in 2008 to California. They are currently building 146 stations in California, by the way, most of them co-located at existing gasoline stations. Since they've been here, they've raised $18.5 million. I know those are modest dollars. They have gone from 35 employees to 150 employees in less than a year. Now, these are small numbers, but if you multiply that by the 234 companies that got funded last year, that starts to be meaningful, both in terms of investment and jobs. Now, here's the bad news, and I don't know whether this was pre-Irene, pre-earthquake on the East Coast, but this is pretty discouraging. Pew has regularly done studies, polls on public view on global warming in the US, and it has changed dramatically since 2006, and clearly in the wrong direction. No wonder when Congress is on recess and they're in their districts, they're not hearing a strong cry for climate legislation. I say here, this public opinion is, of course, very sharply divided among party lines, but when I saw this study, I really was astounded that these numbers have changed so dramatically, in my opinion, in the wrong direction since 2006. So just in conclusion, clean energy is going to continue to grow in this country, and these numbers here represent not just venture capital, but projects going in the ground, manufacturing. I think Ann and I are agreed that there will not be any comprehensive energy legislation passed, federal legislation passed, certainly before the midterm elections, and probably not even coming out of the midterm elections. Thank goodness the states are going to lead the way. They'll continue to lead the way and show leadership. But my fear is that in the absence of federal legislation, we will lose the lead. We are going to lose the jobs. We're going to lose the investment capital. Where we are the leader in innovation, when you have China predicting and setting a goal to have 2 million patents filed a year in just the next couple of years, I'm concerned that we will lose our lead in innovation as well. So those are my prepared remarks, and I'm really looking forward to the Q&A. Thank you very much.
One of the issues that obviously, that as we spoke before, was the issue of policy and subsidies. I mean, it is no surprise that Germany, for example, is ahead. 40% of all solar installations in the world are in Germany, thanks to the feed-in tariffs, right, where Anna disagrees a little bit in terms of the subsidies. No, but one question is very specific to renewable energy. Okay. Is, as you may know, at the end of the year, the cash grant, the Treasury cash grant that has been a huge push for the renewable energy industry is expiring. So what's going to happen when this expires? How do you feel there's going to have an impact, and what can renewable energy developers or companies can do to move forward?
So first, let me say that in Obama's State of the Union address in January, one of the things he called for was leveling the playing field between fossil fuels and clean energy. And if that could happen, you would see that renewables would be not only on a par with fossil fuels, they would be cheaper than fossil fuels. I'm not saying all renewables. And of course, because of innovation and because of volumes, the prices of renewables are coming down. But I am so tired of hearing that renewables are more expensive than traditional fossil fuels, and that's before you add in environmental externalities, just purely on a cost basis. So, but to more directly answer your question, I sold my wind business in 1980, at the end of 1984. It ended up being the business that seeded Florida Power's wind business. Why did I sell it? I sold it because the tax credits were expiring. And in fact, you can see that every time that the tax credits have expired, there's been a sharp drop in development. And that's where I go back to my original statement around market stability, predictable policy. Nobody will make an investment in manufacturing, in U.S. manufacturing, without those predictable market signals.
I very much agree. I do think that we need, I think that we definitely need stability in the market. And it's not that I am opposed to policy. I would be thrilled to have a policy. I was, through one of my hats at the Clean Economy Network, I spent quite a bit of time on the Hill discussing, not lobbying, but discussing with members of Congress the climate bill. I personally am a huge advocate. My challenge is I don't think we're going to get there. And there are many organizations who we actually partner with in the Carbon War Room as well who are doing a tremendous amount of work in this space. My sense is that we have to work with what we have. And working with what we have means relying on the private sector. But that's for proven technologies. That's for a whole different world. Nancy's talking about the importance of innovation and coming forward. And next week in New York, actually, if any of y'all are in town, we're hosting a roundtable with DOE to talk with their research folks, to hear where they are and how some of the folks in the private sector can be helping the research group. I have the same concerns. One of the things that we've also been doing, again, because we haven't seen it coming enough on the government side, is we've been partnering with some of the universities. So there's amazing innovations coming out of the universities that not so long ago would have actually been funded through government funding and is not. So we're looking at sort of ways to do that. I would be thrilled to have a policy. It's just that my concern is that we're not going to get one in the short term. And these are these are long-term issues, but we have to start working on them in the short term.
Actually, hello? Okay. Well, actually, related to that, one of the biggest disappointments for the whole community was the outcome of Copenhagen. And the Carbon War Room actually excelled at filling the gap left by the government and creating innovative and very radical collaboration models between business, academia, policy. So can you talk a little bit more about some of the initiatives that you have in terms of collaborative efforts where very strange bedfellows have come together?
Sure. What's being referred to right now is we had a small group in Copenhagen, and we went into Copenhagen and we basically gave the message that I just said to you. Policy is important, but it's a lockbox. We need to move forward. And when Copenhagen started at the beginning of that first week, there was a lot of hope. And by the end of that first week, people were starting to we were sitting with, we were in Copenhagen, but we were sitting with folks from India, from Africa, from who were wondering sort of like, where's their piece? And then we were also talking quite a bit. We all worked in government. We certainly knew the folks from the U.S. delegation. And we were watching it all sort of come apart. Is Obama going to show up? Is he not? Is this his personal issue? Y'all probably recall a big piece of this. And by that weekend, we convened sort of a small group in the Carbon War Room, and we thought it would be about 10 people. And dozens of people came to hear our theory of change and how to move forward. And then the second week, we started more of the collaborations where we were looking at how can we be helping in their areas that were sort of there was water technologies and that we're going to be we're going to be relying on government funding piece. How can we start getting capital, private capital, to do some of these investments? Having people, OPIC has capital, they want to move. How can we get the U.S. Moving forward? And what we found is we started sitting down with folks from the UN, some of the capital providers, some of the other government officials, as well as some of the academics in different places around the world. And we started saying, what's a blueprint that we can use, or what's an actual business plan? And so when you sit down with the UN Foundation and you talk about a business plan, it was a very new terminology. And how can we start deploying the capital, and how can we start deploying the technologies? And I think what's significant about it is it was maybe the first time that conversation, that people thought maybe we're not going to get exactly what we want on the government side, and what's a temporary solution until we can get to the next piece. I have to say, when we got to Cancun, when we went in and the chairman of my board is the sister of Christiana Figueres, so we have some pretty straight dialogues there. And what you found in Copenhagen is the same folks came together, but we really had a much stronger dialogue of what's a 2 or a 4-year process that we can go through together to, if it's technologies, if it's opportunities, how can we deploy the capital, how can we work together, and then Haiti. So.
Going back to the issue of strange bedfellows, you have seen your share of change in terms of the source of funding. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of how the profile has changed throughout the years? Where is the money coming from that is investing the next generation in clean tech?
Yeah, so we don't. Okay, I guess we're gonna have to use one microphone. So I have so much respect for those, for you all that go to Copenhagen and Cancun and are really thinking, trying to have collaboration over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We have very strict time horizons in venture capital. We have to put the money out, and for those companies that are successful, it's, Ann Han knows this, 3 to 7 years from the time we invest, we either take those companies public or we sell them. And if they're going to fail, they're probably going to fail early, and you move on to the next deal. I know it sounds brutal. It is. The statistics are. It's a high risk, high reward business. Here's where the strange bedfellows comes in. When I went out to raise our first fund in 1993, nobody's investing in venture capital. And what's the source of investment? Who are the investors in these funds? It's the big pension funds, endowments, family offices, insurance companies. Well, do you think that CalPERS would take my phone call in 1993? No way. So what we did is we went out to corporates. We went out to corporations around the world where they cared about what we invested in, and they viewed that investment would give them a leg up, a competitive advantage. By the way, I will tell you the statistics are terrible. We visited 197 investors around the world, and 9 signed up for that first fund. So we have now, most of our money does come from pension funds and endowments and family offices, but we've kept a core group of corporates. And the reason is they've been not only early customers, they've been channels to the market, they've been joint development partners. There are many people who think venture capital is there to destroy the incumbents. Well, I'm going to tell you, in this business, in clean tech, we need those partnerships. We need those partnerships because these companies, these little companies, have to scale globally quickly and cost efficiently. And the only way to do that is to form the right partnerships with the right corporate investor.
Can I say one thing? If y'all just go north of the border in Canada, you're seeing a tremendous amount of investment in this space. And part of it is that when you invest in your state pension, or I'm using maybe it's the provincial pension fund, a portion of that money can actually go into clean tech investments in your community. And we don't really have that same flexibility here, and that would be remarkable if we could have those opportunities. So, it's all you.
So in honoring the time, I do need to ask, what is it like to be a woman, a pioneer woman in this sector, and what lessons would you share with us or anybody who's interested in entering the area, particularly at the earlier stage as an entrepreneur and as a visionary?
Well, first of all, I think it's great being a woman, and I say that because, not because I am one, but because in my field, you stand out. Everybody knows who you are. You want to talk about brand, and companies spend tens of millions of dollars to develop brand, and if you're one of the few women there, it's you're known. I will say that I, in my entire career, have had to over-prepare. work harder than my male colleagues. I will also say that it was really only, being in your 50s is wonderful because I have the experience, I have the knowledge, the history, and that's really leveled the playing field. So when I'm in the boardroom with the guys, and I appreciate the guys that are in the audience today. I don't take this as anti-male. I love working with guys. But when I'm in the boardroom now, the playing field is leveled. So my advice is, if at first you don't succeed, try again, persist. I hate to say it, but over-prepare, and then the playing field will get level, and you will succeed and grow in your career.
Oh God, I think Nancy, my God, she's just awesome. I wouldn't even know what to add to that. She's just awesome.
I have one question, a curiosity, before we pass on to take some questions from the audience. And it's, when you're in Europe, I lived in Europe, and you don't have to be ashamed of saying you believe in climate change. And then I moved to the US, and I started censoring myself. Isn't that the reason why they are ahead in investment and they are ahead in policy? It is because instead of copying the language of the existing technologies, they're actually adding the other sense of value for what is being done?
So when we were involved in raising money and trying to defeat AB 23, that was AB 23 that we defeated, Prop 23 that we defeated. I always get the words wrong. And Arnold Schwarzenegger came to New York, and he spoke to a large group, and I'll be back. And then he spoke to a small group and said, the larger investors, essentially, and he said, I worship Ronald Reagan. I think he is the greatest leader in US history. And he said, but he made one fatal mistake. Jimmy Carter had an energy policy, and he didn't follow it. And the only thing that and I'm paraphrasing Governor Schwarzenegger right now, the only thing he did that Reagan did that I was ever ashamed of was ripping those solar panels off the roof of the White House because it destroyed an industry. What's interesting to me is when Carter actually put in place the policies that he did, it was to address oil, right? It was to address the oil shortage. All these years later, we seem to be doing a lot in energy efficiency. We've done really nothing to address oil, the oil dependency, or very little. I shouldn't speak in such extremes, but we haven't really done enough. And my sense is that that sort of Reagan, that error, he was reflecting the people. He wasn't just one guy. He was reflecting where Americans were feeling. I don't think that we had that's sort of been the build out. And I do agree with you. The question is, how do we get to the next level?
So I'm very lucky to have a number of European investors, and some were actually in my first fund. And so I've listened to a lot of entrepreneurs present their business plan to me. We call it pitch. And if it's a European entrepreneur, almost to a T, 100% start out by saying, this is what I'm doing to help the environment. That's like the first page of the presentation. If an entrepreneur is pitching a venture capitalist in the US, and that's the first slide, that's it, it's a pass. And that is just, to me, that's the most poignant example of, where Europe is so far ahead of us. Now, I will also go back to, I said we have the most developed ecosystem for innovation in this country. So I was sitting through, I misspoke when I said all of my investors in my first fund were corporates. Actually, we had an investment from the National Pension Fund of Sweden. And we did because they valued sustainability, and they'd also just gone through deregulation of their utility industry, and they saw the opportunities that were being created. So I sat through a lot of entrepreneurs pitching me when I was in Sweden, and but what I learned about Sweden, and I've learned about other countries in Europe, but Sweden particularly, was the culture is if you fail once in your career, it's over. And so that's where I say we have this well-developed ecosystem for innovation in the US because, in fact, failure is a badge of honor in Silicon Valley.
Well, in honor of time, I'll be happy to open the floor if we have any questions, perhaps for our panelists. Yes, please.
And I guess my question to you guys, first of all, thank you. That was just extremely powerful and awakening. Is in regards to water and infrastructure, what do you see in regards to that? Because I happen to think that that's also a huge part of innovation.
So, Alana, right? Yeah, Alana, we have made one water investment, but I will tell you that I think water is a difficult market. It's, it's obviously, controlled by municipalities, government, and, the time frame for us to actually, imposed by our investors to actually make a return just doesn't fit with selling to governments. Of course, it's a huge problem. I haven't seen as much innovation in water as I have in clean tech and energy broadly defined. You've got desalination, you've got water treatment, but so we really haven't done very much in water. Others have a much more developed viewpoint just because we've really focused on energy, which is so broad.
I guess just very briefly, we've been looking at some of the quote-unquote proven technologies in the area, in the sector, solar-run desalination plants. There's actually a group that's come together that includes the 3 or 4 largest sellers of bottled water, including the Coca-Cola folks and Nestle. And their big push right now is to get over plastic. So what we're actually doing is sitting down and talking to them about, getting, and one of the people they're working with is through his Cato Fellowship at the Aspen Institute, is Adam, who started Method. I can't recall his last name. And that's a whole nother interesting piece. But so we're looking at it 2 ways in the carbon worm. One is how can we actually put the technology, how can we actually start deploying and see what works and what doesn't work? Dean Kamen has a very interesting technology right now that he's willing to open source. We've been trying to help exploit that to the best of our ability. But it's hard because you have someone like Boone Pickens who is controlling all the water in Texas essentially. And him talking about it as this should be a commodity that I should be able to leverage, and so it's a great question.
One more question? One more question from the audience. Okay.
Hi, thank you. Rebecca Schenker from GNA, and I work in alternative fuel vehicle consulting, largely for fleets, and working on adapting and implementing on the ground level the efficiency technologies, not even just talking hybrids now, but kind of next vehicle hybrids or large-scale LNG, infrastructure projects that are really necessary. And what we've seen is this lack of government funding or the falling away of subsidies has really started to impact what our clients can do at the implementation end. And a lot of these are municipalities or government agencies that need to follow regulation, and they don't really have access to the capital that you're discussing now. But what we really want to see is kind of a way to bridge that gap. And what do you see in the future behind helping small-scale, on-the-ground implementation to overcome that upfront cost when ROI is currently 8 to 10 years, but we know it could be 5 or 3 years down the road?
Well, I just one example. I talked about this company Propel that moved to California from Seattle, and they literally. You're right. You're talking about fleets, and I'm now going to talk about flex fuel vehicles and diesels, which now are, I think there are 11 million on the road today in the U.S. versus how many hybrids? Certainly not enough. And so if you want to address the problem today, you have to be able to get the fuel to the end user. So I'm just going to talk about that piece, and that's where this company is pretty innovative. They're going to existing gasoline stations. This isn't very sexy. They're leasing real estate, building their own, pumps to dispense ethanol and biodiesel. And yes, it's first generation, but there's got to be a bridge, right? And they can't wait for cellulosic to come along in large volumes. And they're working with fleets, They're some of their big customers, and they're building out 146 stations in California. Then they're they have some in Washington, Oregon, and actually have plans for 1,000 stations across the country. You know, one small step, but you know, how many cars could actually use can use alternative fuels today? I think you have, Ann, you've got a view on biojet, because there's going to be a real policy pool on the aviation side. I know you didn't ask about that, but I think that's also a very important piece of this.
So we have these three main areas in the carbon war that we focus on, but 4 times a year we do a gathering called Creating Climate Wealth, and we go into 7 areas. One of the areas, and I can say more about it actually, I want to answer your question, but I wanted to give you the context. We bring together for 2 days entrepreneurs, business leaders, technology providers, capital providers, and for 2 days you're in a working group where you actually figure out how to move. How do we actually move the dial? We have an area called personal transport. And for example, Trimble is a company that's really involved. Trimble is a massive company. They do a tremendous amount in agriculture, but they also have a widget that makes engines more efficient. And Trimble's belief is, I want to get as many of my widgets out as possible, but the only way I'm going to do that is if I can bring everybody else along. So they believe that your industry in particular has the greatest growth, has a great growth opportunity right now. So what we find is what we're finding is there are these gaps that you're talking about, and we actually are saying, come, let's do this, be part of this network engagement, be part of this strategy, and how can we specifically work to move that forward? Where government isn't working, and to the extent that you can.
We have time for one more question from the audience. Curious? No? Yes, please.
Here comes trouble.
So thank you both. That was great. Sitting in the CEO startup chair, I've kind of had this dilemma for the last 2 years, because we had no money, right? So we're running out of cash. And everyone keeps saying that the policy thing is where I should be spending a large portion of my time. But, when you have limited dollars and you can't afford the big lobbying firms, and you're just one little startup, it's very hard to figure out what's a smart use of your time. So do you have any advice for the startup CEO on what's an appropriate amount of effort on policy and how to have the biggest impact for the buck?
Oh, Ann.
Nancy.
Yeah,
I knew you
I
were
know.
gonna-
Every one of our companies deals with this, and I think, and I deal with it personally. I mean, I've spent more time in Washington than I know my partners care to think about. If you can't afford a lobbying firm, that what I've been told, and I've asked this question myself, how can I make a difference here? How can I get my message through that this is about jobs and investment capital? And what I've been told is politics is all local. So if you focus your effort on the local, the local congressional delegation, and then again, with the states taking such a strong stand, if there are states outside of California where you're doing business, but that's the only advice I have. I wish I had a better answer.
I have a little bit of I think it's leveraging opportunities. I think you have a very interesting Rolodex. And I think that there are people who are from you're at BP, yeah, okay, that is who you are, okay. I think the other piece from our perspective is, I think we need to take a little bit. I think one of the issues we've had is we've all been trying to get everything at once. If we could just fix the subsidy issue that you were talking about, just one piece at a time, I think that would be great. I think you'd find that it would actually roll very quickly after that once people saw the success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Where even, organizations that I'm co-chair of E2's California chapter. I was a founder of the Clean Economy Network. Yeah, and so I think you're absolutely right. Put any policy at the federal level, that's favorable to this sector. I mean, and don't try to get everything. If a clean energy standard includes nuclear, I'm sorry. If we can get a clean energy standard, let's do it. Or let's take the what's not controversial. Energy efficiency just can't be controversial. not with decoupling in many states. So I couldn't agree with you more. Let's not try to get the whole enchilada. Let's just start piecemeal, and that will create its own momentum.
Well, thank you very much to Anne, Nancy. Thank you, and thank you for the audience, and I hope you found it as engaging as I have.